guess it's facing this way, right? Yeah. Before we begin the official part of the service, I'm just going to recite the Tziduk Hadin, which is traditionally recited, and I'm going to say it softly, and as I recite these words, which express our regret in the passing of our loved one, but our steadfast commitment to God and whatever God's plan is, I just invite you to think of a memory with Max that conjures up something special for you, and hold on to those thoughts, those special memories. Adonai Natan, Adonai Lekach Yishem Adonai Berach, Ru Rachum Yechaper Avon Yashchid Virba Lashiri Vapolo Yair Kol Chamato. Thank you. We're gathered here today to pay our tribute of affection and respect to our dear friend and loved one, Max Hochman, Mordechai ben Chaim Vesara Halevi, to pay tribute, honor to someone who just loved unconditionally, loved everyone who was in his path. We're going to begin our service with the consoling words from the book of Psalm 23, and I'm going to ask Cantor Tracy to recite them.
Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai Roi lo echsar Bina Deshe Ya Rabbi Tzaini Al menuchot Yenaleini Nafshi Shoveb Yanachaini B'magle tzedek Leman Shemo Gam ki elech B'geit al mavet Lo yirarak yatayim adi Shivtecha ומי שנתך הימה ינחמוני תערך לפניי שולחן נגד צורריי דשנת בשמן ראשי כוסי רוויה אך טוב החסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים.
Thank you so much. Max was born in Dowigronich, Poland on February 18th, 1922. He passed away on January 28th of this year, just 3 weeks shy of his 99th birthday. Max was predeceased by his parents, Jaime and Sarah, his wife Sarah, his brother Leon, his sister Anne Koster, and stepmother Etta. Reach out with sympathy to his family, to his children, Jeanette and Norm, to Sid and Andy, Irv and Sharon, who are with us online. That is, Irv and Sharon are living in Toronto and unfortunately could not make it here. Max is also survived by his grandchildren, by Michael, Melissa, Lana, Sharon and Ari, Jordan and Evan, his sister Etty Slotnick, and someone we spoke a lot about. I don't think he loved anybody more, but he was enamored by this little guy, his only great-grandson, Noam. It's now my honor to call on our speakers. We're going to first hear from Irv. His brother, Sid, is kind enough to hold up the phone. He'll be holding it up to the microphone. And then we're going to hear from one of Max's grandchildren, from Lana. Okay.
Okay. So put it up to the microphone.
It's up.
Is it up?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay. Working. Put it up to the microphone. Okay. My dad was a great father, father-in-law to Sharon, and grandfather to Jordan and Evan. He made Sharon feel welcome from the first day he met her at our engagement party. He loved talking to her, I think more than talking to me. Even though we did not live in Winnipeg, we were fortunate enough to be able to go to Winnipeg for many visits over the years, as well as having him come to visit us in Toronto. We have so many special memories with him, from celebrating our wedding, our son's birth and bar mitzvahs, and of course, many of my dad's birthdays. One of the best birthday presents he ever received was a gold medal for his 95th birthday, which he celebrated in Toronto. He was so excited to be able to see my son, Evan, play in a volleyball tournament, and when they won the gold medal, the coach called my dad up and presented a gold medal to him in honor of his birthday. When my dad would come to Toronto, he always loved going to work with me. It is funny how life comes full circle, because when I was a teenager, and worked every summer for my dad, he would drive to work every day with me in the passenger seat, sleeping of course, because it was way too early to be up. We would stop at different suppliers and pick up orders for customers, which he would take to his office so the customers could come and pick up their orders, or he would deliver them to wherever they needed to go. He did not want the items shipped to the office. That principle has stuck with me till this day. I learned from him the importance of customer service and personal relationships, and I pick up all my orders and deliver them just like he used to. My dad was always very interested in what my sons Jordan and Evan were doing, and his greatest joy was being able to speak with them frequently on the phone. He was very excited for Jordan when he got into law school, as education was very important to my dad, as he was never able to finish high school or go to university. He was also looking forward to the free law services that Jordan promised him. He was hoping that he never needed it. He was equally proud. He was equally proud of Evan. He was equally proud of Evan and his accomplishments in school and on the volleyball court for the Western Mustangs. When the team came to Winnipeg 3 years ago for a tournament, my dad came to all the games in the ice-cold building at the University of Winnipeg. It was minus 40 outside and probably about the same inside. He was a real trooper and never complained. I never knew my dad could talk until our mother passed away 18 years ago. And then when you got him on the phone, it was an hour-long conversation. He loved to tell stories, talk about sports, which was very important to him, and just talk about whatever was going on in the world, including the weather. My dad was a very mild-mannered person who was loved by all. I don't think you will hear one negative thing about him. My dad had his routine. surgery, I think that was all accomplished by 5 a.m. He used to be the first person at Eitz Chaim Shul for the morning services, even before the caretaker would show up. We always joked that the shul should have given him a key. Although we wish my father could have lived longer, he lived a wonderful, long, full life. My mom and dad were married for 56 years before she passed away in 2002. We enjoyed many fun family times and simchas together. It was fortunate to have found a lady friend, May, later in life. The life was so busy, we joked that he was usually busier than all of us. We think that their active relationship is what kept him going for so long. He was very independent up until 6 weeks ago. He cooked for himself, went to seniors programs twice a week pre-COVID, and drove up until November of 2019. I think COVID really took a toll on my father.
You there? Yeah, looks like, well. Apologies, this is what happens in the cold. Yeah. I think COVID really took a toll on my father. It was very isolating for him, but he did love our everyday phone calls, especially when the boys were home all summer and he got to talk to 4 people. We will really miss you, Dad. This is a poem that Irv inserted. It's by an anonymous author. A golden heart, stop beating, hard-working hands at rest. God broke our hearts to prove to us he only takes the best. Of the many, many messages the family has already received, this is just one of them that Irv shared with me last night. This is from a friend. Hope you will find comfort knowing what a mensch your dad was. The sweetest person. I have fond memories from his volunteer days at the hospital to morning minions at Rosh Pina and Eitz Chaim. And Irv writes, Dad, I will always love you, and thanks for everything. Max's mother passed away when Max was only 11 years old. And within about a year, his dad remarried when Max was just about 12, before his bar mitzvah. As you heard, Max was only able to stay in school through the end of grade 9, and he had been an excellent student. I'm going to continue where I left off, but ask Lana to come forward.
So, I'm Lana Hochman, the eldest of Max's 6 grandchildren. I want to start by thanking everyone for being here to honor Max's life. Thank you for the comforting messages we have already received and those ones that are yet to come. It is a real testament to how much he was loved and cherished and the impact he had on those around him. He hated to be the center of attention, so if it were up to him, he would have had me say, "Thanks for coming," and that would have been the end of the eulogy. Unfortunately, he's not in charge, so I'll be sharing some words from those who knew him best, his family. How do you summarize nearly 99 years of a life in a eulogy for such a special person? My Zeta was a soft-spoken, gentle man who was very loving. He rarely spoke about himself while we were growing up, and it really wasn't until his 90th birthday that he started to open up and share stories about his early life. Zeta was proud to talk about his experiences, and we got to understand how his past had shaped him into who he was. He lost his mother when he was only 11, and his brother was also ill. His dad remarried soon after his mother's passing, but unfortunately, due to his brother's deteriorating health and increased medical costs, his dad could no longer support him. His dad reluctantly made the decision to send Zeta from his small town in Saskatchewan to Winnipeg for work and made arrangements for him to stay with a family friend. Zeta was never able to complete his high school education, having dropped out after grade 9 to earn a living. His first job was developing photographs, and it instilled in him the value of hard work and earning for your family. Leaving the house at such a young age forced Zeta to become fiercely and stubbornly independent. Losing so much so soon undoubtedly sparked a zest for living, which drove Zeta to live so long and die so young. It was something he shared in common with his sister, Anne, who passed away less than 1 year ago at the ripe old age of 96. Zeta and Auntie Anne had a special closeness, being only 1 year apart in age. Even though Auntie Anne lived in California for much of her life, they remained close and had a standing Sunday morning 10 a.m. phone call for many, many years. One of Zeta's favorite memories was being able to stay with Auntie Anne and his younger sister, Auntie Etty, for an entire week in January of 2016 when my parents traveled to California. Zeta and Auntie Anne would bicker about the secret to living a long life. Despite her insistence that mall walking was the key, Zeta did not enjoy daily walks at the mall as a way to stay young. They did, however, both agree that time spent with family was time well spent. Yiddishkeit or Jewishness and tzedakah or charity were evident in every part of Zeta's life. He was a regular synagogue attendee at Daily Minions until about 5 years ago, and even then, if someone needed a 10th man to make a minyan, he was the guy you called. During the high holidays, everyone knew where he sat and would make a special trip to see him, way at the back of the auditorium. The adult Jewish programs at Gwen Sector and Stay Young were the highlights of his week. He gave both time and money to many charities during his lifetime and volunteered into his 90s at Health Sciences Center and Folklorama. Zeta always went out of his way to support his family. Did you know he had an airport shuttle service that guaranteed a warm vehicle and provided wake-up calls at all hours of the day and night? But he didn't just do airport rides, though. He was always willing to help us out, driving us to school, dropping off treats, and attending our sporting events. He attended all of my dad's sporting events in high school and continued this with his grandkids. You could always see the little smile on his face and glimmer in his eye when he attended an event, and usually he had a candy in his pocket for us at the end. Last winter, after he had finally given up driving at age 97, I would pick him up and take him to the Seven Oaks soccer complex to watch my soccer games, and so that he could talk the ears off of my teammates' husbands. Zeta had a very hard time accepting any help from others. He would argue with you if you tried to help him or repay him for a favor. When I picked up groceries for him, he would remind me to keep the receipt and then demand it as soon as I arrived at his apartment so that he could write me a check immediately. We would argue for a short while, but he always won the argument. This is the only memory I have of him getting even just a little mad. I did manage to pay for a dinner one time when I had a pizza and he had his usual salad. Zeta loved to share his favorite stories over and over. It got to the point that we knew how the story ended, but we would always let him finish. Many of his stories started with, "I was at synagogue or Gwen Sector, and I saw someone who knows you." When you'd ask who it was, his response was more often than not, "Oh, you know who I mean." He was great with faces, but not so good with names. From what my dad says, he was always like that. I'm sure that is why he kept organized notes and records. He never forgot a birthday and would always send a card in the mail, so it would arrive well in advance. Zeta sent Hallmark cards only. You could tell he had scanned dozens of cards before he selected the perfect and most appropriate one for you. It always sounded like he had specially written it, just for you. I remember Zeta telling me the story about his heart surgery, a quadruple bypass, which was on the 9th day of the 9th month of 1999. The doctor told him after such a surgery, he was expected to live 10 to 15 years. Well, he blew that one out of the water. He had a special connection to God. Before he turned 90, he had recurring dreams that he would call God to ask if he would live to make it to 90. God said yes. The same thing happened before he turned 95. Once again, God said yes. After 95, he had similar dreams and asked if he would make it to 100. He never got an answer. Zeta always used to talk about the future by saying, "God willing," he would be at certain events. For example, Farron and Ari's wedding. Not only was he there, but he was agile enough to even dance the hora. After Noam's birth, he hemmed and hawed about going to the bris in Edmonton. He was just so worried he might not feel well and be a bother. He didn't want to inconvenience anyone, ever. We convinced him it was an event he just couldn't miss. So at 96 years old, Zeta and I flew to Edmonton together. He couldn't stop telling people at the airport how he was the only person not going to Edmonton that weekend for the Grey Cup, and he had waited 96 years to become a great-grandfather. Zeta just sat and watched Noam for hours that weekend, like he was watching a Toronto Raptors playoff game. Unfortunately, he hasn't seen Noam in person since summer of 2019. But his eyes would light up when he saw him on video chats and when Noam called him Zeta Mac. He just beamed with joy. It's one thing to become a grandfather, but great-grandfather is a whole other story. We don't know what his secret was for such a long life, but my goodness, he didn't look or act his age. I remember at Farron and Ari's wedding that his not-so-much younger sister Anne was upset that he had such nice skin. I know that my dad and Uncle Irv were jealous of his beautiful white locks of hair. Last year when Farron and Ari were in town, my parents, Dan and I played the game of things. It is a game that you write a funny response to a prompt and then you try to guess who wrote that. The category was things you don't want your parents to know. And Zeta wrote, smoke cigarettes at age 6. We all assumed that Zeta had made it up, but I guess you learn something new every day. People who have reached out to us keep saying how funny Zeta was. He certainly had his moments and would share one-liners such as these. Their name changed from Gotchman to Hochman in Canada because they had more status and got to move up in the alphabet. The reason he had no middle name is because he couldn't afford it. And I think one of his favorites was, I was in the Air Force and I served overseas in PEI. Zeta had a special friend, Helen May. She was a positive influence for Zeta. She encouraged him to open up and express his love in words to his grandchildren. We always knew he loved us, but had a hard time expressing his feelings. We told him we loved him when we spoke to him, and he got to the point where he had no difficulty saying, I love you, and making a point of telling us he said it first. He especially loved hearing that Noam loved him. It was such a privilege to tell my friends that I still had a living grandparent that was so functionally independent and pretty with it, as he would say, living on his own until December 2020. Even though we had many years together, it never feels enough. Our Zeta's picture should be next to the word mensch in the dictionary. We can all learn a lesson from how he lived his life and how he treated those around him. What an honor to call this man my Zeta. Love you.
Thank you. There's so much more that can be said. It's hard to capture the life of someone who lived almost 99 years. But I want to share just a few more things, and then I have words I want to say that I'm going to offer later this evening at the Shiva service, which I'll let everyone know about soon. I think it connects to Lana, which is the relationship he built with his grandkids. That was something they were encouraged to build on their own with him, and Max reciprocated. And it certainly was very much the same way in how he cultivated the relationship with Noam, his great-grandson, who he would always tell me about. I also want to make mention of the relationship he had with the people who married into his family, and if I can, because I've known this part of the family for longer, I want to note Andy's relationship to Max. They've known each other for over 42 years, right? Um, and Andy was really, along with Sid, a person who encouraged her daughters to develop that relationship with Max and Sarah and keep that connection alive. But Andy and Max shared something in common. They both had family in California. And through those bonds with their family members in California, that created an even deeper connection for Andy and Max. Before we get to the closing rituals, I just want to let everyone know who's joining with us that Minion was so important to Max. And as Sid said appropriately to me the other day, maybe this is the payback. For all the times that Max insisted on showing up at shul, at synagogue, he never wanted anyone who had to say the Mornis Kaddish to not be able to do so because they didn't have a quorum, they didn't have 10. So we're going to be holding services. We'll hold one this evening at 6 p.m. Everything will be online through Zoom, and you can go to our website, the Eitz Chaim website, to find that information. And then on Monday through Friday, we'll be meeting in the mornings at 9 a.m. along with our regular evening services at 6 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and then Friday at 5:30. I want to let everyone know that donations in memory of Max are encouraged, and should you be inclined, you can consider donating to the Gwen Sector Living Center or to Eitz Chaim, to our congregation. I also want to let everyone know that it should be on the live stream at this point, but there is a URL, a web link to a virtual guest book which you can sign on to and just share your messages with the family. At this time, I wanted to call on Cantor Tracy, who is going to chant the El Malei Rachamim and may have something else to add. Actually, before we get to the El Malei Rachamim,
Yes.
yes, we are going to first, my error, we're going to I'm going to encourage everyone to participate with me who can. But we're going to place the earth on top of the casket. And the way we do this is we hold, Sid, I'll give you one to that side. And we can do it simultaneously, but the custom is to hold this upside down. It's a way to let God know we're disappointed with God's decision. And we take earth 3 times this way. You can do it once, holding it in the usual manner. And then we place the shovel down so that the person behind us can step into this sacred space with hatred. Sorry about that.
There isn't one day in recent years where I don't sing without a special candy in my mouth, except for on Kol Nidre and Yom Kippur. And Lana, I'm glad you brought up the candy in the pocket, because I feel like I can tell this little story with a little more ease at the moment. A few years after I started as cantor at Congregation Eitz Chaim, Max showed up at the side of the bima one day with a white bag filled with cinnamon glatt kosher candies that he had gone to Bulk Barn to get for me to help me take care of my voice. And as a kid growing up at synagogue, there was always an older member of the congregation that would often hand me a candy. The difference is for Max, they were wrapped and weren't filled with lint, which was special. And so Max. And I've always felt that those candies had special powers and that they're like my secret weapon. And I just finished the one that was in my mouth. And of course, they're my secret weapon, not because of the ingredients, but because they come from my friend Max. So there are a few things predictable about a synagogue, the Ark and the Torah and the Ner Tamid, and for our synagogue, Max. And to say he was a fixture of the synagogue makes it almost sound disrespectful. How can a human be referred to like he's an object? But by Max's presence, our synagogue is Eitz Chaim. So as we join together about to recite the Al Malei Rachamim, and we ask God to grant him infinite rest in God's sheltering presence, I want to invite you, those of you standing here and those of you online, to all think about how Max's presence presented the kind of comfort that we can pray will transcend time and place. And when we gather together again in person, or even when it's on a screen, we can be inspired by his memory to make our congregation and the future generations of his family even stronger as we honor him. So I'll invite you that are online to now rise for the El Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim Shochen Bamaromim Ametz Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfer Shechina V'ma'alot Kedoshim Uteharim Kizohar Lakiyam Mazirim Et Nishmat Mordechai ben Chaim Halevi Vesara Shalach Leolamo Began Eden Tiem Menuchato An Abal Rachamim Hastidayu Beseter Kafech Olamim וצרור בצרור חיים נשמעתו אדוני ונחלתו וינוח בשלום על משכבו ונאמר אמן.
I am going to say something later, but I think it's so significant that we have focused on the candy. Because what you may not know is after Max passed away, Sid went to his place, to Max's apartment, to check in and looked through his dad's things. And he noticed that, I think it was in your dad's pant pocket, in one of the drawers, he found only one candy. And so we had an understanding that one candy would be placed inside the grave with Max. And what do we say in Hebrew about things that are sweet? We say they're matok, or you are my sweetness, you are mituka. And Max, I mean, that is the epitome of who Max was, the sweetness. I didn't know Max in the days where he didn't talk. I thought he was marvelous in how effusive and authentic he was in telling me about how he felt. And I was, like Tracy, one of those fortunate people who he said he loved. I don't know why. I feel like Max, every time you'd ask him, why is it that you've lived so long? I don't know. And then he'd give that big smile, and I don't know. But what I can tell you is that when I was with him, I felt like I was 8 feet tall and could do anything. So you will forever be remembered, Max. There aren't enough words for us to honor you. At this time, I'm going to ask everyone to join with me as we recite the Mourner's Kaddish. Yikadal v'yikadash shemei Rabbah be'alma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael b'agala v'zman kari v'yimeru amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevorach Leolam Umei Almaya. Yiparach V'yishtabach V'yitpa'ar V'yitromam V'yitnaseh V'yitadar V'yitaleh V'yitalal Shemei Dekudesha B'richu Le'ela Minko Birchata V'shirata Tushbechata V'nechemata Damiran Dalma Vimaru Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya V'chaim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael Vimaru Amen. Oseh Shalom B'Ramav Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael Vimaru Amen. Before we conclude, I just want to thank everyone who's with us physically and those of you who are online. We say to you, Jeanette, Sid, Irv, and the entire family, this one verse of comfort, Hamakom yinachem etchem betoch shar avlei Tzion v'Yerushalayim. May God continue to grant you comfort amongst all the mourners of Zion, Jerusalem, and throughout the entire world. This concludes our service. A reminder that there will be a 6 p.m. Shiva Minyan online through Eitz Chaim. Thank you.